Let me be real with you for a second. The Raiders are at a crossroads and everybody knows it. This isn't one of those situations where you can slap some optimism on it and call it a day. This is a moment that actually matters, the kind that defines franchises for a decade or more. And right now, sitting right in the middle of all of it, is a young quarterback named Fernando Mendoza and a fan base that's been starving for something to believe in. So let's actually talk about it. Not the hype, not the headlines, the real conversation. Because there's a lot happening around this team right now, and if you're paying attention, you can feel the energy shifting in a way it hasn't shifted around this franchise in years. Raider Nation is loud right now. People are fired up, takes are flying in from every direction, and some of them are genuinely wild. But some of them might actually be onto something real, something rooted in football logic rather than pure wishful thinking. And that's what I want to dig into today. Not just surface-level reactions, but an honest breakdown of where the Raiders actually are, where they might be going, and what Fernando Mendoza truly means for all of it. Let's start with something I honestly wasn't expecting to even partially agree with. The idea that the Raiders could finish in the top 2 of the AFC West this season. Gio dropped that take, and when I first read it, I laughed, because the AFC West is no joke. The Chiefs are built into the fabric of this conference like they own the deed to the whole building. Mahomes doesn't just go away, even his slightly less dominant years are good enough to win divisions. Then you've got the Chargers, with enough offensive talent to make things uncomfortable for anyone, and the Broncos aren't the pushover they once were. So when someone says the Raiders are climbing into the top 2, your instinct is to hit the brakes hard. But here's what keeps pulling me back. Clint Kubiak didn't just make moves, he made the right kinds of moves. There's a massive difference between those two things that doesn't get talked about enough. A lot of franchises in rebuild mode throw money around like they're patching a sinking ship with duct tape, grabbing whatever name they can find and hoping something sticks. What Kubiak has done feels more intentional. There's a philosophy behind the decisions you can trace from the draft board all the way through free agency and coaching hires. That kind of coherent vision from a front office feels almost revolutionary when you've watched this team spiral through the chaos it's endured the last several years. So do I think the Raiders win the division outright? No, I'm not selling you something I don't believe. But top 2, competing hard every single week instead of getting buried by halftime and checking out before October? That's within reach if the pieces develop the way their talent suggests they can. And reaching for that standard, even falling just short, represents real, measurable progress. Progress matters even when it doesn't come with a championship. Now let's get into the quarterback situation, because this is where everything gets complicated and fascinating at the same time. Cameron Stevens dropped a clean, simple take. Fernando Mendoza starts week 1, and I completely understand the excitement behind it. When you've watched this franchise cycle through quarterbacks the way the Raiders have, when the revolving door just keeps spinning, and you finally land someone who feels like a genuine future piece, you want to see him out there immediately, under the lights, in a real game, on the field that actually counts. But I have to be honest, I don't think Fernando Mendoza starts week 1, and more importantly, I don't think he should, not unless he goes into training camp and absolutely blows the doors off in a way that leaves zero doubt in anyone's mind. Kubiak himself has already said there's no predetermined starter. He's letting it play out in camp, letting the preseason be what it's supposed to be. A genuine competition with genuine consequences where the best man earns the job regardless of what the plan looked like in March. You don't hand a young quarterback the keys before you've watched him drive. You don't throw your future into the deep end before you've made sure he can swim. Kirk Cousins is there for a real reason. A veteran who understands pressure from every angle. A bad start, a hostile crowd, a fourth quarter slipping away. That experience isn't nothing. For a team still building its identity, having that steadiness under center while the young guy watches, learns, and absorbs everything around him is intelligent roster construction. That's how you protect a prospect. That's how you develop him without crushing him under the weight of expectations he isn't ready to carry yet. Now, and this is where it gets genuinely interesting. I'm not slamming the door on Mendoza starting, because the NFL doesn't care about carefully laid plans. If Fernando Mendoza walks into training camp and is simply undeniably ready, if every practice and every preseason snap is screaming at the coaching staff that this kid has it figured out ahead of schedule, then Kubiak has to make that call. That's what good coaches do. They adjust to the reality in front of them instead of clinging to a script written months before they had the information they have now. History backs this up. People forget how quickly things flip when the right player is in the right situation. Derek Carr wasn't supposed to be the immediate starter in Oakland. Then suddenly he was the guy and nobody was arguing. Russell Wilson wasn't supposed to step over Matt Flynn in Seattle. Nobody wrote that prediction beforehand. These moments happen to teams with the right culture, the right coaching staff paying close attention, and a young player who is genuinely ready to handle the weight. So I'm not ruling out week 1 for Mendoza. I'm just saying it needs to be earned completely and convincingly before that conversation becomes the right one to have. Here's where I threw my own take into the mix, because if I'm asking everyone else to put their opinions on the line, I should do the same. The Raiders make the playoffs, and Fernando Mendoza is a significant reason why it happens. Let me be precise, because I don't want this misread. I'm not saying Mendoza starts week 1 and immediately torches every defense in the league. What I'm saying is more nuanced. There's a very real version of this season where things start rough, where Cousins gives you what Cousins gives you, competent and professional, but ultimately not quite enough to push this team over the edge. And then somewhere in the middle of the season, when the moment demands it, Mendoza gets his shot, and he runs with it. I've seen that narrative play out in this league more times than I can count. A team drifting toward another forgettable season suddenly gets a jolt of electricity from a young quarterback who doesn't yet know what he's not supposed to be able to do. That's the dangerous thing about young quarterbacks with real talent. They haven't accumulated the fears yet. They haven't absorbed all the times someone told them the situation was too big or the moment too heavy. They just go out and play. Mendoza stepping in at the right time, catching fire, and dragging this team into a wildcard spot while the rest of the league looks the other way. That's possible in a real, grounded way, not just romantic thinking. And if it happened, if the Las Vegas Raiders crashed into January football on the back of a young quarterback in his first real run as a starter, the fan base would absolutely lose its mind. Rightfully so, because Raider Nation has been waiting for something like that for too long, and hungry fan bases riding young quarterbacks on impossible runs. That is some of the best football storytelling this league produces. Let's talk about the supporting cast, because the quarterback conversation doesn't exist in a vacuum. Brock Bowers is already a certified weapon. There isn't a linebacker or safety in this league who wants to spend 4 quarters figuring out where he's going to line up next, what angle he'll create, what matchup he'll exploit. His presence alone creates space for everyone else, and that kind of gravitational pull is invaluable for a young quarterback still learning to read NFL defenses. Having Bowers to come back to when the pocket gets uncomfortable, that's a luxury that makes everyone around him better. Ashton Jetu brings explosiveness and big play potential this offense has genuinely been missing. The offensive line, when healthy and functioning as a unit, has the potential to give a quarterback real time to operate, to go through progressions, to trust what he's seeing. That's something you couldn't always say about recent Raiders teams, and it matters more than casual fans sometimes appreciate. The defense is where things get quietly encouraging if you're watching closely. Kubak and Spytek didn't treat that side of the ball as an afterthought. They brought in pieces with real purpose, players who fit the scheme conceptually, rather than just filling roster spots because the calendar demanded it. That kind of intentional building doesn't announce itself loudly in week 1. It takes time to gel, time to build trust, time to find the communication rhythm of a new system. But by mid-season, if that defense develops on the trajectory its talent suggests, this team becomes legitimately difficult to play against. Hard to move the ball on consistently, hard to score on when it matters. A defense that forces opponents to work for every point. Late in the season when games get physical and every possession feels heavier, that's a formula for winning games nobody expected you to win. Now I have to get to the wildest take of this entire conversation, and I have to give Max Morgan credit for the sheer audacity of putting this out there without flinching. Fernando Mendoza leads the Raiders to a Super Bowl championship in 2029 in Allegiant Stadium, right there in Las Vegas. Home crowd, full circle, everything a sports story is supposed to be. My gut instinct when I first saw it was to just laugh and scroll past. But the more I actually sat with it, turned it over, looked at it from different angles, the more I realized this isn't completely disconnected from reality. It's ambitious, obviously, but there's actual traceable logic buried underneath it. Think carefully about what 2029 looks like if this build goes right. Mendoza would be entering his 3rd or 4th full year as the unquestioned starter, carrying real experience and the benefit of a coaching staff that's had years to understand exactly what he does best and build a system around those specific strengths. Brock Bowers would be approaching one of the best stretches of his career, experienced, operating within a system that knows precisely how to deploy him. Cap flexibility from current roster construction gives Kubak room to add meaningful pieces through the next couple of draft cycles. The offensive line continues developing. The defense, built with intention from the ground up, keeps adding through smart drafting and targeted free agency. This isn't fantasy. This is how good roster construction actually works when you follow the arc over multiple years, with discipline and consistency. And the location genuinely matters to the story. There's something powerfully symbolic about the Raiders winning a Super Bowl in their own building, in the city they relocated to, in front of the fans who made that journey and stayed through the transition and the tough years and all the disappointment that came with building from scratch in a new market. That would be one of the most emotionally resonant moments in franchise history. It would validate everything: the move, the rebuild, the patience required to sit through ugly seasons while the foundation was being laid. I'm not penciling it in on any calendar, but I'm not laughing it off as pure delusion either, because it isn't that. It becomes a believable destination if the next several years of execution match the vision that appears to be in place right now. What I keep returning to, underneath all the takes and speculation and noise surrounding a franchise in the middle of a rebuild, is something simpler than any individual prediction. This genuinely feels different. I know how that sounds. I know every fan base says that at some point, and I know the scar tissue Raider Nation carries from extensions of trust that went nowhere. But I'm talking about something structural this time. The kind of difference that shows up not in one flashy signing or one optimistic press conference, but in how a front office approaches an entire draft. How a head coach talks about competition and development and patience, how the roster pieces actually complement each other rather than simply existing in proximity. Kubak inherited a difficult situation, and he's not pretending otherwise. He's not overpromising his way into the fanbase's goodwill. He's building, methodically, intentionally, with a consistent sense of what this team needs to become. That kind of disciplined approach is rarer than people acknowledge. Most organizations are fundamentally reactive. They chase the last trend, overpay for the last available name, reach desperately for quick fixes that feel good in April and collapse by November. What Kubak is assembling has the look and feel of something more durable than that pattern, something that could actually last. Fernando Mendoza sits at the center of all of it, not just because he's the quarterback, but because of what he represents for this franchise at this particular moment. He is the most visible, most tangible evidence that there is a real plan here with a real future attached to it. Whether he starts week 1 or takes over in week 8 or spends a full season developing behind Cousins before his moment comes, what matters is that he's here, that he has the tools and the makeup franchises spend years searching for, and that he has the infrastructure around him to become what people are daring to hope he becomes. So where does all of this leave us? It leaves Raider Nation in a place it honestly hasn't occupied in a while. Genuine, warranted optimism with real, specific reasons behind it. Not blind faith, not desperation dressed up in optimism's clothing. Actual reasons grounded in actual evidence. A coherent coaching staff. A structured multi-year build with a philosophy behind it. A franchise quarterback prospect with legitimate upside. One of the most dangerous tight ends in the league. Enough defensive pieces to establish an identity and make opponents work. That's a real foundation. Will they win the AFC West this year? Probably not. The Chiefs aren't going anywhere. Will Mendoza start week 1? My read says no, but camp hasn't opened, and I've been surprised before. Will they make the playoffs? It depends on variables we can't fully see from here, but it's absolutely within the genuine range of possible outcomes. And could Fernando Mendoza one day raise a Lombardi trophy in Las Vegas? Someone has to win it. Someone unexpected always does. Why can't it be this team? Why can't it be him? Raider Nation has been waiting a long time for something real to believe in. And right now, for the first time in longer than it should have been, that waiting actually feels like it might be leading somewhere worth arriving.